Good evening. It's August 28th, 2018, 5:30 p.m. I'd like to bring the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Call the roll. Member Wolf?
Here.
Member Wolf present. Member Hinsey?
Present.
Member Hinsey present. Chair Tesfaye?
Present.
Chair Tesfaye present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we go over any agenda changes?
Madam Chair, we have received a request from Ms. Trabeau to have her complaints postponed to a future date due to an emergency. She also requested to testify via telephone. However, we have not heard her call in at this time. At your discretion, we could wait until later in the meeting to take up the possible postponement if you like.
Would the other members be amenable to moving the other items up and then possibly bringing her item forward at the end in case she calls in?
Sure. And
I
she was planning to testify regarding her postponement.
It is unclear. However,
Okay.
there is other complications regarding her complaints as they are very closely related to other items on the agenda, so
Okay.
it may be best to wait until later on the agenda to see if, to allow her to call in to testify.
Okay, I will take your advice.
Do we need to have a formal motion to make that agenda change?
It's not an agenda change as we haven't called it yet.
Okay, great. Can we call the next item?
Item number 2, approval of the June 26, 2018 Complaint Committee meeting minutes.
Thank
Move to
you.
approve the minutes.
Second.
Can we get public comment on that motion? Seeing no public comment, can we take that item as approved by acclamation? Thank you. I'd like to call item number 3.
Public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda.
Do we have any public comment at this time? Seeing no public comment is closed.
Next
Move to
item.
item 4. Yes, please.
Next item, number 4, file number 18054, complaint filed by Mike Black against the Office of the Controller for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6725 by inappropriately invoking provisions for extensions of time to respond due to the voluminous nature of a request or need to consult with other departments.
Is the petitioner present? Hi, good evening, Mr. Black.
I'm Mike Black, and I would just like to quickly go over the relevant facts.
We're going to start the timer for you.
Okay, how much time do I get?
Minutes.
I prepared 5 minutes, but is that? Oh,
That's
okay.
fine. So just let the clerk start the time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the morning of June 19th, I submitted to the Controller's Office an immediate disclosure request for all their records related to any new hearing officer for the city's vicious and dangerous dog hearings who had been hired in 2018. I had submitted that request to the Controller because that office has for some years been the city entity that contracts with these hearing officers as independent contractors. And I had reason to believe that the city had hired a new hearing officer. The next afternoon, I received an email response from the Controller advising me that they didn't know if they had any responsive records and needed 14 more days to consult with another department. That was untrue. The Controller's Office most certainly did know that they had not hired a new hearing officer, and so they could not have had any responsive records. How do I know this? Because after I hurriedly submitted a second IDR on June 20th, asking the folks at the Controller's Office to identify all hearing officers currently under contract, on June 21st, they identified only the 3 known hearing officers who had all been hired prior to 2018. But it's also important for you to understand that the Controller's lie had been a calculated one. Hiring a new hearing officer was not some obscure piece of bureaucratic minutia, but it had for good reason been front and center at the Controller's office for a couple of months, and for Mr. Rydstrom in particular. On April 19th of this year, hearing officer Jeff Foster had made racially prejudicial remarks about an Asian American woman who had appeared before him at the hearing that day. The Controller's office was advised that very day of the incident, and a week later, on April 26, when the Controller, the City Administrator, and Animal Care and Control all protected this hearing officer's misconduct and allowed him to continue hearing cases without advising any of the participants of his expressed prejudices, I complained directly to the Controller. According to records I've received from the City Administrator, the next day, April 27th, Mr. Rydstrom organized a special meeting for Monday, April 30th, to deal with the issue. A meeting also attended by Joyce Kimotsuki of the Controller's Office and Deputy City Administrator Jennifer Johnston. The next day, May 1st, in response to a request from Ms. Johnston, Ms. Kimotsuki emailed her explaining how it would take the Controller's Office 6 to 8 months to find and hire new hearing officers. Well, that was obviously too long. In an explosive hearing in this very room 3 weeks before my June 19th IDR, a young Asian American complainant who had learned of hearing officer Foster's remarks publicly called him out and refused to have her case heard by him. Foster had to go immediately. And so by early June, 2 new hearing officers were hired by unorthodox means and in violation of the San Francisco Health Code, which requires that the hearing officers be designated by the police department or the Department of Public Health. And the public records make clear that, indeed, the Controller's Office had nothing to do with those hirings, as Mr. Rydstrom finally admitted to me on June 29th, 10 days after my original IDR, declaring that the Controller had hired no new hearing officers and had no intention to do so. I would also note that in violation of Sunshine Ordinance Section 67.21c, neither he nor anybody else at the Controller's Office ever mentioned exactly who might have hired those new hearing officers, though surely they had some idea. It's easy to see what was behind all of this stalling and subterfuge, the desire to hush up a racism scandal while getting new hearing officers in place as quickly as possible without calling any attention to the questionable process. But the only relevant point for this committee is that the Controller's June 20th response to me was a deliberate lie. Nothing goes more effectively to that conscious deception than the fact that nobody would put their name to the lie. It was simply signed Office of the Controller. That's why I named Controller Ben Rosenfield personally as the subject of my complaint. The Controller's Office acted with blatant contempt for the law in its June 20th response to me, invoking a 14-day extension to provide documents they knew didn't exist. And it perfectly exemplifies a wanton disregard for the right of the people to know what their government is doing. Is that my end?
You have 30 seconds.
An attitude that gets tolerated way too often. I would just point real quickly then, I see that Michael Petrillis is on the agenda tonight, yet again having to bring the recalcitrant London breed to your attention. And it just seems like in my experience here, this goes on over and over again where, you're very good. I'm so happy. I can't tell you how happy I am. There's a Sunshine Commission. Well, I wouldn't have gotten some documents if it weren't for you guys last year. So I know you do good work, and I think most of you are really committed to it. But there's no accountability really sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a respondent present from the Controller's Office? Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Todd Rydstrom. I'm the Deputy Controller. Thank you for the opportunity to appear tonight. By way of context, the Controller's Office serves as the Chief Accounting Officer and also the Chief Auditor for the City and County. What that means is that we also are the administrators of the city's financial system. We run the HR system as well as we also run the procurement system for all 55 departments. On the dates mentioned, I'll go through them briefly for you, but I want to also, for the body's review, know that we routinely respond to hundreds of public information requests a year. Last year alone was 655, and so we really take this very seriously, and we want to provide people with questions a complete response. So our procedures take that into account. On June 19th at 9:07 a.m., Mr. Black sent us an information request, and this is detailed in the timeline as well as our response in your packet. That request specifically was for all public records of any new hearing officer hired in 2018 for San Francisco's vicious and dangerous dog hearing. That request was not for the Controller's Office department hiring a vicious dog. While we do have a pool, a current active pool for hearing officers, any city department may hire other hearing officers from our pool or otherwise, and our RFQ specifically outlined that. So why was it necessary for us to consult other departments? As I and staff had done in our June 20th response at 3:58, we said we do need to consult another department, and we will endeavor to complete our response before the date of the extension. The contract pool currently had 3 hearing officers, and we have provided that information to Mr. Black. In addition to that, part of our practice is under Sunshine Ordinance 67.21, as a custodian of public record, when we do not have possession of records requested specifically of any contract or hiring by the City and County of San Francisco, we do try to assist requesters by directing the requester to other proper offices and staff persons. That was the intent for us to contact other departments, namely the Human Resources Department, who controls hiring and the appointment process, as well as the General Services Agency, where animal control, under which animal care and control reports. On June 20th at 4:47 p.m., Mr. Black sends a revised request. Here specifically, he says he would like the names of any and all independent contractors who are currently under contract with the City and County and any public record in the Controller's Office that confirms. We can immediately respond to that, and we did. We did that on June 21st at 11:08 p.m. because we know within our department who we have under contract or under pool. So you will see this along with our other 600 public information requests and responses that we've done last year alone, that we take it very seriously, and we want to help any customer and any public member who asks for public information. And that is really the spirit by which we run our responses. And so I believe this complaint is a misunderstanding and perhaps unfortunate way the wording of the request to the degree that it was a controller's office pool. We had that information and we provided that very quickly within 4 business hours of getting it. To the degree that the question as originally posed to us was for any contract or any hiring in the city, we have to consult and ask other departments because we wouldn't know that information. The rest of the timeline is outlined in the packet for you, and we look forward to helping the public, and we will continue to do that as best as we can.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for the petitioner or the respondent?
I do.
this time?
I have a question for the respondent. Can you pronounce your last name again, please?
Riedstrom.
Riedstrom. Mr. Riedstrom, can you tell me who hires the hearing officer for this particular position? Since the 2016 request for quotes, the Controller's Office had a hearing officer pool that departments could use when they selected hearing officers. Can you explain what that means? What is a pool?
Yeah, we provide a few different pools, and those pools are pre-qualified, competitively bid opportunities for suppliers of professional services or otherwise to be eligible to have gone through a competitive process and then to be quickly put under contract and hired for services. So hearing officers, which we did one for vicious and dangerous dogs in 2016 was the first time that we had done that. That had previously been done through animal care and control in another department. However, I do want to also point out that even though that pool exists, that in no way requires or restricts departments to use it. And so, in fact, as we stated in that RFQ, the rights to procure services either similar or identical to those under that RFQ pool could be done by departments. There's no legal requirement to use that pool.
So whose responsibility is it to hire for this particular position, this hearing officer for the vicious and dangerous dog unit?
The department here, the animal or the General Services Agency, Animal Care and Control, could choose to select a hearing officer from that pool, and then that hearing officer would then get the rates as competitively bid under that proposal.
But could they also hire on their own?
They
is what
could
you're
hire
saying?
on their own.
So there's kind of two. Okay.
Have they? Okay, that's too detailed of a question. So it's not the responsibility of the controller's office to make this hire?
As we stated in the RFQ, the responsibility of the controller's office is to provide. In this case, we provided the ability of departments to use a pre-qualified pool. There's no requirement that they do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Black, I have a question. Just to clarify for me, can you ask me what? Listening to your testimony, it sounded like you were saying that the controller's office was in control of who hires this position.
The controller is who signed for the city for the 3 sitting officers of the last couple of years. They're the ones who actually execute the contract with the independent contractor. So that's why I thought it was reasonable to go to the controller to see if they had contracted with a new hearing officer.
Oh.
And I've spoken to the hearing officers, and they feel that they were hired by the controller's office. And and these were officers specifically hired for vicious and dangerous dog hearings. They're not like a pool that can be assigned to some other kind of business for the city. They're vicious and dangerous dog hearing officers.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess my question is it sounded like that the controller was the one who actually makes the hire, but from the explanation Mr. Rydstrom had just stated that it sounds like that they just qualify a pool of potential contractors that the department, I guess this would be Animal Care and Control that runs this unit, right?
It's a complicated question, but
well, I'm just wondering if okay. So, but in any case, I wanted to get back to the timeliness issue, because that was the focus of your complaint. The detail of this is not as important as the complaint of timeliness. So, when you first made your initial IDR request, did you get a response by the end of the following business day?
Yes.
And what did that response say?
It said they weren't sure if they had any responsive records, and they needed to check with another department.
Okay. And when did they get back to you after that?
Well, as Mr. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name earlier, Rydstrom. Mr. Rydstrom explained that I submitted another IDR that very afternoon. And it was not really an amended one. It was really a separate IDR that was asking for specific information. Well, tell me who are the hearing officers under contract at that time. And he was able to provide me a response. These are the hearing officers under contract. In terms of my original IDR, I did not get a response until the 29th of June, when in fact Mr. Rydstrom did admit that they had no records because they had not hired any new hearing officers.
Okay, thank you.
So, are there any other further questions, Member Hinsey?
Not at this time, no.
Maybe we can have just some discussion between the three of us. Right now, I don't see evidence of a false use of an extension. There were two different questions that were asked. The first question had to do with hearing officers that were hired, which could have been done through HR, general services, animal care control. The second question, which got an immediate response, had to specifically do with hearing officers that are hired on retainer through this pool process. That would be information that was under the purview of the controller's office with their immediate access to that information. And to that question, a response was given within 4 hours. So looking back at the first question, I don't see how the immediate response, not immediate, but the 4-hour response to that second question shows an indication of an improper use of 6121C, because they're two different questions. The first question would require the controller's office, I believe, to be in contact with HR, general services, and animal care control to find out if any hires had been done for hearing officers for the vicious and dangerous dogs hearings. So there are two different questions that were being asked. I think if it was the exact same question that was asked in the first request and the second request, then there might be possibly some evidence of an improper use of an extension or 6721C. But at this time, Mr. Reedstrom from the controller's office has been able to specify which departments they had to speak to in order to get a response together for question number 1. And he's also explained why for question number 2, all of that information would be, within the controller's purview, because they're the one that manages the pool of hearing officers. I would like to hear what the other members think at this time. Of course, I'm not making any kind of a judgment on this case, but I'm just trying to find out what additional information we would need in order to support a case under 6721C and send this to the full task force.
Go ahead.
Okay. So hearing the testimony of the petitioner, the complainant, he's claiming that he made 2 independent IDRs. So the second one seems satisfied. So we can dispose of that. And I believe this complaint is focusing on his first initial IDR. So he received a response appropriately within, by the end of the following business day, and then an extension was invoked. The question I have is that and I believe we can check with him again, is that after that response, he didn't get a response.
About 10 days later. He put the first request in,
Okay.
I believe, on June 19th, and please correct us if I'm wrong, and then he received the full response saying they had not hired anyone else on June 29th, according to what I had read.
Okay. So,
But I think right now we're being asked to use the response to the second IDR as evidence of an improper use of an extension.
can we clarify that with the petitioner, please, Mr. Black? Can you clarify that? The introduction of the second IDR complicates things.
Well, so my understanding, I got this response on the 20th, which was kind of a non-response. It was asking for more time. And, I was just trying to establish who was the new hearing officer. I just assumed the controller had hired that person. And when they said, well, we're not even sure we have responsive records. All I could think was, well, I know who the hearing officers are that I know. And so I basically thought, well, why don't I ask who are the contracted here? I couldn't imagine that anybody else anybody besides the controller's office was contracting hearing officers. So why don't you just tell me who the contracted hearing officers are right now? And that it seemed like that would confirm that, in fact, they were hiring somebody else or they hadn't hired somebody else. Well, it confirmed they were not hiring anybody else. There were no new hearing officers. So I concluded, I think reasonably, that, in fact, there was no new hearing officer hired. He's talking about other departments. I asked for the records that the controller would have because I understood him to be the hiring entity for these people, this pool of, if he wasn't, then why didn't he tell me? Well, I think you have to check with the animal care and controller, or I think you need to check with the city administrator. That's incumbent upon him as well. And I never got that. I never got anything like, oh, well, we didn't, but you might want to check with. I mean, I know who hired them now. I know who hired the two. Like I said, they didn't have anything to do with it. But I suspect they knew what was going on because, like I said, everybody was trying to keep this quiet. And I don't understand why he wasn't advised then that the city administrator and, as it turns out, the Human Services Agency got dragged into this as well, and hiring officers for the vicious and dangerous hearings that they'd never had anything to do with before.
Thank you. So from my understanding, the city controller's office needed that extension of time to check with these other departments and make sure that no one else had hired them. I understand why Mr. Black would have the understanding that the controller's office was in charge of hiring them, because that's where they had come from in the past. They had come from the pool. But what we've learned today from the controller's office is, though they have this pool available, other departments are able to hire outside of that pool. And I do think that the controller's office, it was incumbent upon them to ask these other departments, and that's why they got the extension. They did need to check with other departments in order to get a complete answer, which in this case was none had been hired. But do we have any other information that we need right now?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think we can move this to the full task force.
Yeah.
We have all of the information needed. So does anyone have a motion that they would like to make, or further questions?
Before I make a motion, I'm a little curious. This item has already been heard in compliance.
For jurisdictional purposes only.
For jurisdictional purposes.
Oh, okay.
For the 45-day rule, or
Yes.
for jurisdiction?
Jurisdiction and 45. And
So,
to determine whether or not the task force has jurisdiction and whether or not the records are public or not.
so we only need to make a content motion then of finding on the merits of the case,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Is there a motion?
So I'll move that to forward this to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force.
Without a recommendation?
No recommendation. We don't make recommend. I am opposed to committees making recommendations.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any comments on that motion? Seeing none, can you call the roll?
Yep. Member Wolf?
Aye.
Member Wolf, aye. Member Hensy?
Aye.
Member Hensy, aye. Chair Tesfaye?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
ayes have it, the motion is passed.
Thank you.
Just for the parties concerned, you will receive notice when this matter is scheduled before the full task force for hearing. We don't anticipate anything until my best guess would be October, November.
Thank you. Please call the next item.
Item number 5, file number 18049, complaint filed by Robert M. Smith against the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to respond to a request for public records in a timely and/or complete manner.
Just to provide a little clarification, I did go through the various emails. It appears that there were 5 separate requests for records. I did request that the respondent respond to each one individually, just for your convenience.
Thank you. Is the complainant present?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Can you have 5 minutes?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the task force. Can you hear me okay? I have a cold if you can't.
Speak into the microphone.
First, the briefest of notes about why I'm doing this. I'm certainly not being paid for it. I was a correspondent in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times. I also served in the administration of Jimmy Carter as Special Assistant to the Attorney General and Chief Spokesperson for the United States Department of Justice. Therefore, I believe fully, as I know you do, that public agencies should be transparent and should obey the law. I can summarize this matter quickly. I asked the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, a public entity, for documents. They provided only 2 documents in response to my requests. 2. They returned to me a copy of a form I'd filled in as an application to be a docent. In other words, they gave me back my own document. The only other thing they gave me was a roster of current docents. They didn't even want to give me that roster, but I had a long conversation with Mr. Scott Jones of the museum. Mr. Jones assured me that 45% of the docents of the museum are men. I asked him for the roster. He told me it wasn't available because it was in another office. I asked him to get it out of the office and send it to me. He said the office was locked. I don't believe I'm reciting this conversation, but it's true. I suggested getting a janitor to unlock it. You can see the level of silliness. In the end, I suppose he got a janitor. In any event, somebody mailed the roster to me. When I got it, I saw that Mr. Jones had not been truthful with me. 95% of the docents at the museums of San Francisco are, in fact, still women. But I looked into the matter more deeply and found the art museum is not really a public museum. No. There are 3 governing entities of the museum. Think of them as 3 silos, just metaphorically. One silo consists of the so-called public museum. It's not clear, because I haven't been allowed to see any of the documents, what that silo consists of. Then there's a silo which is a private foundation. That raises the money. Then there's a silo which is also private, and which also runs or manages the museum. The museum, in essence, has been privatized. Since 2 of the silos have been set up to be private, whenever documents they have about how they're running the fine arts museums of our city are out of reach. That's the bottom line. What cannot be out of reach by law, however, are the documents in the public silo. A citizen would logically imagine the public silo communicates with the other 2 silos. I'm interested, in particular, with communications between the silo managing the museum and what I'm calling the public silo. How is the museum being managed, and by whom, and when, and for whom? It's these documents in possession of the public silo, that I've gotten none, I repeat, none of. Why do you suppose I haven't? The museums have not given one single plausible legal basis for not giving me the documents. Many, many, many months have passed. So, we don't have to go through a big pile of documents here, folks. We don't have to read requests and responses, in my view. There are none. They haven't conformed to the law at all. They've made 2 arguments. 2. First, they have 250,000 documents on their computer servers. So what? They could have 2 billion. That has nothing to do with this. And they also made the argument that they're switching computer systems. The switching computer systems does not seem to have shut them down. They're functioning. It's not a permissible reason for not responding to a lawful request. They asked me to help them by reducing the time frame for which I've specified the documents I wanted. I accommodated that request. I did, as they asked. It didn't help. I still got nothing. I accommodated the request. I did not have to do so. Then they pressed, after I did that, to identify the exact documents that I wanted. They're not allowed to do this. Under any scheme one can imagine of freedom of information, sunshine, whatever one wants to call it, public records, it isn't possible until I have some sense of the documents they do have.
You have another 30 seconds.
Oh, thanks. If they will give me the documents that the public silo has from the private silo, or indeed any documents at all, I have no idea what they have. How could I know? How could anybody know? And that's not what the statute says. The only possible unhappy conclusion is, I'm unhappy to say it, these people somehow believe they're above this law. At the end of the day, these are public documents. I need and respectfully ask for your help.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is anyone present on behalf of the respondent? Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Melissa Powers. I'm here on behalf of the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, and I'd like to address a few points.
Timer. Thanks.
I'd like to address a few points by the respondent, as well as just make some general points. First, I'd like to start out with, throughout Mr. Jones's efforts in all of the requests for information dating back to January, the beginning of this year, he has made good faith efforts, and we have attempted our best. We have made our best efforts to be transparent and to provide those documents that we believe fall under the rules of a public record to be provided that don't fall under any other exemption. Yes, the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco is governed by 3 boards of trustees. That is the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, which is a charitable trust department of the city, and then we do also have the 2 501c, which is the COFAM, which is the Fine Arts Museums Foundation, and then we have the Corporation of the Fine Arts Museum, COFAM, which is another private 501c3. So when the respondent is referring to the documents that he's requesting, and he just says he wants the documents between COFAM and FAMSF and FAMSF and FAMF in regards to the server, all of the employees that work at the museum have the same sort of domain at famsf.org. So after he did narrow the time frame to January and February, which we did appreciate, we were looking at, in actuality, after speaking with our IT, actually over 250,000 emails. And without any type of narrowing of the scope, you would be looking at a overly burdensome obstacle to try to review all of those emails. And while the point has been made that he's entitled to all of the emails, the Government Code 6253B does talk about that records sought must be identifiable. Mr. Jones did ask if he would be willing to use a term. A lot of this genesis comes from an application to become a docent. And we suggested, how about if we use docent? How about if we use, or logically, maybe your last name? But instead, it has been open that it needs to be all of the correspondence which pertains to the management, which is a lot of documents. It would be basically every document under the roof of that museum. So we would ask, in going forward, that we would like to work with him, but we would like to have a more narrow scope of what documents he would be specifically looking for. In terms of when I looked at the review for jurisdiction by the city attorney, I saw the different legal issues that the attorney had laid out, and the question in terms of were we timely. We were timely in the sense that for every complaint, Mr. Jones either provided what he felt was the adequate response to the question within either 10 days or within invoking his extension for 14 days. And we understand for complaint number 3, which is the one regarding all the correspondence, no records were provided, but that's because we had the discourse with him in terms of, could you please narrow the terms? So no documents were provided in that, but for the other complaints, they were provided in a very timely response. As far as the issue regarding the server, that was not a made-up situation. The museum was going through an email migration, and to throw a vague search into a server that was being changed would have been pretty much not doable at the time. And we have moved away from that migration. And again, going back to the point, with a more narrower focus, we would be able to attempt to do a search more pleasing to Mr. Smith. As far as some of the other questions, I'm just looking at the other issues here in terms of what was identified. In terms of any other records that Mr. Smith feels that he didn't get, Mr. Jones, he determined which ones he felt fell under the umbrella of the city, the Fine Arts Museum San Francisco, and which ones he felt fell under COFAM or the other private charitable organization, and that was not a document that the city would be able to turn over.
You finish your sentence.
I was going to say, just in full transparency, in reviewing and getting prepared for the hearing, I found one document that was from a COFAM employee that would have fallen under his analysis, copy to a city attorney, that's a city employee within the museum. And that employee is out of town for a couple of, I think, work weeks, so I'm not able to ask if he had a retention of that to make that a document that could have been turned over for complaint number 5.
Thank you. I'd like some time for questions. Members, do you have any questions for the petitioner or the complainant?
I have a couple clarifying questions for the respondent. Ms. Powers, that's right, correct? Your name is Ms. Powers?
Yes.
All right, your exact role at the museum is?
I am the manager of board relations and special projects. Mr. Jones was previously the manager of board relations and special projects, and that job also entails responsibility of public information requests.
So Mr. Jones was the one who dealt with the petitioner?
Yes.
In his request. And my other question is, COFAM is?
COFAM is a charitable, it's a private 501c3 organization whose primary purpose is to support, aid, promote, and operate in conjunction and supplement the activities of the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco.
Okay. Those are my questions at this time.
Okay, please, I have some other questions. This position, Manager of Board Relations and Special Projects, who's that under?
I work in the executive office for the Chief of Staff.
Of
the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, but I am...
You're a city employee?
No, so that's where kind of it gets, depending on, we work at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, but several employees are paid by COFAM, so we're considered COFAM employees. And so basically, if we were to give you the documents of all the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, like city employees, we're talking, as an example, everyone who does security, the grounds maintenance.
That's of no consequence. It's all public records, except if they're protected by some other law.
Correct. No, I understand that. But my point being, in terms of if there being no narrowing of the subject, we would be looking at also, as part of that trove of correspondence we're going through, things that may not be relevant to what Mr. Smith might be interested in.
Right. And so that's my next question is, why? Who cares? I mean, why is there a necessity for him to narrow the focus if he's an investigative reporter, let's say, and he wanted to find out how the whole thing operated and wanted every single document so that he can get a clear understanding over time of how things operated, he and any other person is in their right to have those documents as long as they're public and available for distribution.
As long as they're public. But the way that our system is built in terms of how emails go between employees, some of us might be COFAM employees and some of us may be FAMSF employees, but we're all under the FAMSF email domain.
Right.
So it would be... Which
makes it, if you're in the city's system, makes it public.
Correct. I mean, we're not saying that if it's a city employee and a city employee, that would not be something to be reviewed.
No, even if I'm an individual person or I'm a company that is a private company and I send an email to a public official, to a department head, to a regular city staffer, that's a public document.
That's correct. So starting with the amount of correspondence in just 2 months on an email would be over... and I think the number that was originally provided to him was underestimated. I think we could be possibly looking at 400,000 emails.
I'm not disputing it's voluminous.
So my point being that I believe that the code allows for some narrowing to not make it so burdensome on the organization.
No. What makes it not burdensome is your request for more time.
Well, then, if that's the case, then I would like to invoke the rule of reason and ask then that only a certain amount of time is provided in the event of having to review those documents. Could it be 5 hours a week? Because otherwise, it would basically, if someone who was tasked with reviewing 500,000 emails, not to count even hard copy correspondence, the time frame of that would be, to be quite honest, who knows? I mean,
so okay, I hear you. That could be a reasonable argument for a rule of reason. We're not going to adjudicate that here. That's for the task force to decide. My question then becomes, what about the use of a rolling, providing documents on a rolling basis?
We could, if it is felt that we should go back and provide documents on a rolling basis, we can start looking at the correspondence and see if we can meet Mr. Smith's needs in that. Whether it sounds like the next task force hearing won't be until, or if it's referred to the task force until October or November, I'd be more than happy to speak with Mr. Smith to see if there's some sort of agreement we can come to between then of what would be a satisfiable rolling. But again, we're talking about potentially only 1 or 2 employees being available to review all of these documents. And that becomes, very cumbersome and would pretty much stop the ability to execute other duties.
Right. We could figure out something with the full task force,
right,
or perhaps send it to one of our committees to determine what a reasonable rolling basis would be to get this information.
Right.
But if the nature of the response is going to be voluminous, that's something that you'll have to work out with your staff, and we can assist in that process to make a rolling basis possible. Right now, I think, looking back at what this complaint was, it was 67.21, failing to respond to a request for public records in a timely and/or complete manner. I think we have evidence that shows that this was not responded to in a complete manner, and there is agreement between both the petitioner and the complainant that all of the documents have not been turned over. So I think we have enough information there to move this before the full task force, because also if you look at 67.21 for failing to respond in a timely manner, we heard from the respondent that they invoked a 14-day extension, which does not exist. So it's a 10-day extension, and it sounds like you were possibly improperly advised by the city attorney's office.
No, but even if I misspoke, I apologize. But if you were to look at all the time frames between when Mr. Jones got a request and when he actually responded, I believe they were all within whether 10 days or if he invoked it with no more than 10 days from when he said, I need an extension. And there was a typo in his complaint 3 where he said he responded on February 26th. It was really February 2nd. So when I looked at every single timeline for every complaint, when the complaint was received to the point that Mr. Jones might have said, I need an extension, there was no more than 10 days from that point.
If we can get some kind of confirmation about that from the petitioner, that would be helpful. If that's what your records show as well this isn't a time for you to just make another statement, but if you can respond to my question about that.
Helpful. I don't want you to be misled.
Okay, so did you receive...
Well, and I don't think misled is really the accurate verb.
Was there a 14-day extension invoked or a 10-day? We're hearing from the respondent that she misspoke. She meant 10-day, not 14. Just trying to get some clarification with you on that point.
And if I may,
we're not adjudicating this today.
Right.
We're just
if I may, to be fully clear, Mr. Jones is here, and if he wants to confirm whether he invoked 10 or 14,
We can hear from him as well after we hear from Mr. Smith on that narrow question.
Yeah.
You can approach the microphone.
Microphone.
I don't wish in any fashion to be contentious at all. And my purpose is not to burden a public institution. I don't know the answer to the 10 versus 14-day question you were kind enough to pose. May I say that it really doesn't matter. Why?
I mean, it does matter because I posed that question, and if I want that information, I can have it.
What
so
I'm
if you could just take a
suggesting-
moment to look through your records and see.
I absolutely will.
Okay.
But they said they would produce materials on a rolling basis. They said it. It's in the documents. They didn't ever produce a single one after saying they were going to a rolling basis.
Okay.
I just wanted to...
Just under 6721, they need to, if they're going to file for an extension, request an extension, it's a 10-day extension, and that's a very bright line that we need to be able to delineate to create a record for the full task force.
May I furnish that bit of information to you after the hearing? Is that all right?
I would like to take a moment to hear from Mr. Jones, and during that time, if you have some moments to look through your records, that would be great. But if we can hear from Mr. Jones on that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Jones can come up and fill in the blanks, but
Thank
I
you.
could actually also, if you need, to give you the specific days or dates that he actually
important.
responded.
Are those in writing?
Is this in the packet? Yeah, is this in the packet?
It is in the packet with each complaint. The first page of respondent's response is his timeline of the dates that he did. But to give you an example, if because I going through it,
Thank you.
double check the dates. For example, complaint number 1, it was received on January 9th. Mr. Jones responded. He invoked an extension on the 20th. There was a federal holiday in there. And then within that, he responded on, I believe, February 2nd.
Yeah, so that's beyond what is allowed if he's requesting a 10-day extension.
Is it February 2nd?
Okay, that's helpful. It sounds like all of the dates are in the packet.
Yes.
That's what you're looking at, and that's what we need to make sure that we have for the full task force. Are there any further questions
I
from the other
do.
members?
I have further questions.
Do you and would you like to hear from Mr. Jones regarding the extensions he invoked? Or
As long as that information, I just wanted to clarify, was in the packet, just because what I heard you say was 14 days, and so I just wanted to get clarification there. It sounds like you've given me that clarification.
right, and it was you invoked only 10 days, correct? It was 10 days.
Okay,
so
thank you.
My mistake.
And
Member
so
Wolf?
I just want to, I think some of the other information I think the task force might be interested in is some of these records, or maybe none of these records, but you had mentioned that there are 2 other quasi or absolutely independent entities of the museum. And as the Mr. Smith had pointed out, or I think I think maybe you pointed out that one actually operates or is manages the operations of the museum, and the other one
Well, they
provides
each have their own
funding.
They each have bylaws and charters, and
I understand. My point is were any records? Did you invoke withholding any records from those 2 entities that are not?
Mr. Jones did respond that records that he reviewed he felt were COFAM records and that were not records that he could turn over for, because some of them, for example, were also just COFAM on its face.
I'm going for more about status of these organizations, not the actual documents. It's important because the Sunshine Ordinance speaks to entities that are not government entities or bodies, but are under contract, or that these entities provide specific services. For instance, the Friends of, pick a department. Any of those Friends of, if they're provided any kind of extension of real estate, like an office, or they provide direct funding to that department, a government department, there are certain requirements that are listed in the Sunshine Ordinance for that. On top of that, nonprofits that are contracted with the city have their own sunshine law.
Correct. Well, and I don't want to miss, but I believe in preparation for this that my conversations brought to me that there was not, COFAM does not pay the city any money in terms of making, I think if you're talking about 12L, Administrative
Yes.
Code 12L
Yes.
applicable. And so like COFAM.
But 12L is about contracting. It's not about.
Right, and I don't
providing
believe
monies.
that, I am not aware of that there are actually specific contracts between COFAM and in the city.
So how do they have any jurisdiction or ability to operate in a city building in this
It's
capacity?
how we are considered COFAM employees, and
But who is COFAM? I mean, is it a 501c3? Is it a what
COFAM is
it?
a 501c3.
Okay, and is it a 501c3 created by the city? Like an enterprise agency of some sort, or an NGO?
I don't believe it's created by the city. Its membership is comprised of FAMSF and foundation trustees.
All right, I think we need to get some clarity on this, because
Yeah.
if some of these documents are being requested by Mr. Smith and they're being withheld, and there's no citation of law or code, and they're being claimed as being independent, and what is the relationship of these organizations? And I think that's a very important question. We've been down this road with other cases before.
And there may be an opportunity here for Mr. Smith to be able to get this information via that avenue, and we'll need to have an opportunity to explore that. It's not in the packet at this time.
I understand, but I think it's incumbent upon the respondent to provide this information
Right,
as
and
part of their
I would rather
defense.
do that through another complaint committee hearing than before the full task force, because there's a lot of things that are entangled right now. And so if there's some specific information that you would like the respondent to prepare for us, I think that would be really helpful.
I think that would be good. So what I would be interested in is what are the legal and contractual relationships of COFAM and FAM to the city entity? That's
So the three
museums.
silos, the one public and then the two private, the foundation
Right.
and then the foundation running the museum.
Right. And I think that would be enough information for the task force to then expand upon.
Right,
at that
because
point.
here there might be, as you said, 250,000 documents, 400,000 documents for the public entity, but then there might be more documents that explain the relationship, which I believe was part of Mr. Smith's original request, that would have to be obtained via 12L, not through this process. And we want to make sure that we can take care of that entire issue through this one item.
And if I may ask, when would you like this information?
Well, we'll need it for when it would be
Right.
within
30
5 days of your scheduled hearing with the task force.
Okay.
Well,
Or 5 days prior.
it would
the
need to be
hearing.
5 days prior. I don't think it's appropriate to send this item to the full task force yet.
Okay.
There's a lot of entanglement, so it would be 5 days before your next appearance, before the next complaint committee hearing,
Okay.
so that we would have time to look at those documents and prepare for a discussion with you on how this is applicable.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I think that a good rule, I'm not sure, we could check with our clerk as to the next time this can be calendared. My hope is that it can be next month, and it would be 5 days prior to that date.
Okay.
Just the last Tuesday of the month.
Okay, and just
Sorry. My apologies.
Okay.
is there anything you want to add to this point before?
Ms. Lachey or Mr. Young, do you think that we will be able to calendar this item, continue it for the next complaint committee hearing?
That should not be a problem.
Okay, so that would be 5 days, 25 days from now, basically.
And just, I understand this, but if Mr. Jones might be able to shed more light on those three pillars, if you'd like to hear from him tonight.
We would need to have written documentation of that.
Okay.
One, so that Mr. Smith can look at it and get an understanding of what he's going to need to respond to. And I think it would be better for us to be able to approach all of that in writing rather than hearing it.
Okay, understood.
We'd appreciate it. Though.
Okay.
If you want to provide a narrative in addition to documentation, that would be very helpful. A narrative like what you would say right now, in addition to supporting documentation, bylaws, what have you.
Okay.
And I guess the only other thing would be, can you identify which documents Mr. Smith is requesting per each silo? Or each
No, that's, I
entity?
mean, in terms of, that's the point, like, if we were to look at all of our emails, they're under FAMSF.
Is there records other than emails that he's requesting?
Well, then that would be, well, he says any and all correspondence.
I understand. Okay. Well.
So-
all right. Well, okay. Thank you.
Do we have a motion right now to continue
I'll move to
this item?
continue this item to the next complaint committee.
I'll second.
With the request for this information to be provided?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Do we have any comments on that motion?
Public.
No.
Ask, just, am I...
Can you speak into the microphone? What's your question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. Can I get some idea, if possible, of the timeline after you've gotten information from them? Am I entitled to respond to you about whatever it is they proffer?
So what will occur is when they send that information to our clerk, we'll make sure that you receive that information 5 days prior to the hearing so that you will have time to review it and prepare any kind of a response. And I believe that you can prepare that you can provide that response orally that day.
And is that before this committee?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to try and make sure that any supporting documentation for your complaint is all together in a package before you appear before the full task force.
Thank you.
And there's nothing stopping them from continuing to provide you with more information that's part of your request. And if you do receive more, please let us know so that we can not ask about that.
Of course.
That items, okay?
And I have no wish to do anything. I'm not allowed to, but I haven't had a chance to respond to what was said, and some of which, unhappily, is really not true. I'd like to at least have the opportunity, very briefly, in 2 minutes or less, to straighten that out. May I? You've been told.
I think it would be better if you put that in writing so that it's in the packet.
All right.
Yeah.
May I? There are 6 points, and I've got them. And you've been, I must say, I'm torn between politesse and truthfulness. You've been misled here today, really. And I'm sorry to say that.
But please make sure to provide that information to our clerk. He'll also our clerks will make sure that information also goes to the respondent, but we would really appreciate it in writing so that it's in the record.
Of course.
And that's
I
our
will
preference.
absolutely do that. I would feel badly if what they said stood uncontested.
Yes, and if you have any documentation to support what you're saying,
I do.
then that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So again, we have a motion. Is there any public comment on that motion? Seeing no public comment, please call the roll.
Member Wolf?
Aye.
Aye. Member Hensy?
Aye.
Member Hensy, aye. Chair Tesfang?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. I'd like to take just a 5-minute break at the restroom. And then, Mr. Young, do we have any update on the call-in?
I have been receiving emails from Ms. Trevor. It appears that the
Okay.
phone number provided her was not working correctly.
Okay.
I have just emailed her the correct phone number. My suggestion would be to move on to the next case.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then
Okay.
we'll come back. Thanks.
Thank you. Turn off the audio. And pause the recorder. Pause the audio. time to give me a Let's get back on the record, then we can talk. I just want to wait for her to call back in. Hi, Mr. Bo, are you on the line?
I am on the line.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
we're about to reconvene the meeting. Please remain silent until we address you directly. Thank you very much.
What item are you on?
We're about to go into your items. Just give us a moment. We're going to restart and read the agenda.
Okay.
We're back on the record.
Will the clerk please call the next item?
Actually, before we continue, I'd like to inform you about the next two items. One of them is filed by Ms. Trabeau against the Arts Commission. One is filed by Mr. Clark against the Arts Commission. The complaint is the exact same complaint against the Arts Commission filed by two separate petitioners. I'm not sure how you would like to handle that. Mr. Trabeau has requested a continuance of her item, which is item number 6 and item number 8.
Thank you. I'd like to post that question to the members, Member Hensey, Member Wolf. Sounds like these three items revolve around the same facts. How do you, and one of the complainants has requested that her items be continued. How do you think that we should proceed? I see that we have the other complainants present as well as a representative from the respondent present, I believe.
I can argue both cases. I'm ready to go forward.
Okay, but Ms. Trabeau, is your preference that we continue it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I can do it now. There was a family emergency, came up at the last minute. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
I'm ready to go forward.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Members, do you have any thoughts?
I believe the question is, do you want to hear them separately or at the same time?
Members, do you have any preference on that issue?
Well, if we decide to combine them, if that's the question, then we do have to get some input from the petitioners.
Yeah.
Right. I'll tell you where I'm leaning at this time would be to combine them, but then give the petitioners their own 5 minutes. Not combine the 5 minutes by any means. Each of them have their own 5 minutes. And the reason I say that is I would hate to hear, for example, item 6, which is Ms. Trabeau's item, make a decision there, and then listen to the next item and gain more insight into the situation and come to a different conclusion.
Right.
And so I think that it would be beneficial to the members of this committee to hear the items as a combined matter so that we can gain as much information about the whole picture and not decide, one petitioner's case differently from the other. Because once we decide one, we can't just go back and switch things around. So,
Right. I guess my concern would be, I think that is very wise. I think that if there was some inkling, some detail that made one different from another, that would be significant. And I would hate for it to, in the middle of it, for there to be a concern about that.
Right.
And then the question is then how would the task force make a motion? Would they be a combined motion with 2 complainants and 1 respondent, or would they be independent actions at the full task force? I think for the purposes of gathering information, if everything is more or less the same here, that's one thing. But I think at the task force level, I think everybody having their own day.
So is your proposal that we hear the items together here, but we do not formally combine the items? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that possible,
Yes,
Mr. Clerk?
we can just call both items at this time.
Okay. Mr. Boo, were you able to hear our discussion?
Absolutely. I can hear it. I agree with it. It's fine with me.
Okay, so we are going to hear items, I believe, 6, 7, and 8.
But I think we need to ask the other petitioners if they were.
Okay, so how about we have a motion and then ask for comment from the parties on that motion
Okay.
that we were just talking about, so we can formally hear from
All right,
everyone.
so I move that for the purposes of this complaint hearing, that the item 6, 7, and 9, 6, 7, is it 6, 7, and 9?
6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8.
You might want to exclude item number 8, even though the issues may be the same, it's a different type of complaint.
Okay,
Just
so
6 and 7.
6 and 7. So for items 6 and 7, that we combine those items for the purpose.
Or just hear them together,
We hear
not
that-
formally combine.
Right.
Okay.
We will hear those items together.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Just to clarify before I second, but each petitioner will have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Second.
Do we have any comments on that motion, particularly from the complainants?
I would just like to
Please,
understand.
state your name.
I'm William J. Clark. I would just like to have you clarify whether the respondent would get 10 minutes to answer, since you're giving us both 5 minutes
question.
apiece.
Members, do we have any thoughts on that? I think that on this motion, perhaps we can also hear from the respondent to that issue. If they would want 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then we can decide. Okay, that's good to hear. Do we have any further comments on that motion to hear these items 6 and 7 together? Seeing no further comments, can we take that by acclamation?
No objection.
No objections? Okay, great. Thank you. So please call items 6 and 7.
Item 6, file number 18056, complaint filed by Ann Trabeau against Ann Trickey and the Arts Commission for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6716 by failing to make meeting minutes available in a timely manner. The June 5th, 2018 Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Crafts Examiners. Item number 7, file number 18059, complaint filed by William Clark against the Arts Commission for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6716 by failing to make meeting minutes available in a timely manner. June 5th, 2018 Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Crafts Examiners.
Great.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Is there some way that we can let Ms. Trabeau know when her time is coming close and when her
I have a clock.
Okay. And there should be also there will be like a chime at 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
That will let you
Sounds
know.
good.
And so the way we will proceed is first we'll hear from Ms. Trabeau. We'll give her 5 minutes. And then Mr. Clark will have his 5 minutes. And then we'll have the Arts Commission with their 5 minutes. Is everything clear? Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Trabeau, please
Yes.
begin. And we'll start the clock here as well. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the complaint committee. I outlined in between pages 176 to 178 my argument for the advisory committee being a policy body. I cited the Brown Act, specific sections, various ordinances, and my contention is that the advisory committee is a policy body. They vote, they approve screening criteria, they vote people into the program, and that's my contention. In page 23 of the Clark's complaint, which is now public information, they have provided copies of the ballot measure of Proposition L, and it clearly states that Proposition L is a charter amendment that falls within the policy or the criteria of this being a policy body. And then the statement of the Clarks that the advisory members are paid by the city and county of San Francisco, and they are therefore employees, falls within the purview of Section 67.4 parentheses 5. And on page 276 is a copy of the voter's pamphlet as it appeared on the ballot measure, I believe in 1975. And then there's a summary, which also appeared on the ballot measure from the Controller's Office, which states that basically this is a policy body. And then there's the contention that the advisory committee is a standing committee. It meets on a monthly basis, and it has for a number of years. That falls within the guidelines of 67.3D5 of the Sunshine Ordinance. It is a policy body. It should conform to the every aspect of a policy body, which includes posting of minutes, which includes public comment. You don't throw people out in a sentence because you don't like what they have to say, et cetera, et cetera. I feel very passionate about this because I believe that it is a policy body. It is enumerated in the charter. It's not a some hybrid. Proposition now was amended a couple times through an ordinance, through the Board of Supervisors, and these are in the packet. These are violations of the Brown Act, of the Sunshine Ordinance 67.3D3, 67.3D5. And in Kay Patterson's letter, response letter of June 26th, she fails to include any factual reference to the San Francisco Arts Commission has consulted with the city attorney over the years in regards to this committee's status. What city attorney, what memo, what dates, what times, we don't know. It's just a statement. And then on page 2 of her response letter, she repeats the same sentences and provides no proof to support her allegation. I have tremendous difficulty with this advisory committee and the fact that two independent people who don't speak to each other filed independent complaints speaks to the fact that there's huge doubt as to what's going on with this advisory committee. It is a policy body. There's no doubt about it. I guess that's been unfinished.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Booth, did you say just a minute or that you're done?
I can only reiterate a conclusion that the advisory committee is a policy body, and all the provisions of the Brown Act and the Sunshine Ordinance relating to a policy body apply to the meetings of the advisory committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Clark, are you ready? Okay, give us a moment. We'll put your 5 minutes on the clock.
Okay, thank you, committee members. I want to point out that a few days before I filed this complaint, I had sent an email to the Arts Commission titled, "This is not a Sunshine request," and I asked them I said that the minutes weren't posted yet, and I asked them when they were going to be posted, and I received an email back from the Arts Commission saying that the Advisory Committee of Artists and Craftsmen Examiners is not a policy body, and that's when I first got wind of this, and then I filed I made an official request for the minutes, and then was told that they were claiming this was not a policy body on the basis that they claimed that the original street artists, the original Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Craftsmen Examiners, which was the official title back then, was approved by the Board of Supervisors. It was written by the Board of Supervisors, approved by the Board of Supervisors, and that created the original Advisory Committee, of which I was the first secretary on that committee. And since that time, so according to their objection, they were claiming that because it was written, it was an ordinance approved by the Board of Supervisors, that it was a passive meeting body. And according to the Sunshine Ordinance, if we're going to go all the way back to when this committee was first created, it states that any advisory board, commission, or committee or body created by the initiative of a policy body, and it also, that's 67(3)(d)(4), and also any board, commission, committee, or other body created by ordinance or resolution by the Board of Supervisors. So the original advisory committee was created by the Board of Supervisors. Then in 1975, the original street artist ordinance was put on the ballot word for word with the original ordinance, and the voters then approved the Proposition L, which is exact word for word as the original street arts ordinance. So, and it was the Board of Supervisors who wrote Proposition L, and it was the Board of Supervisors who put that in front of them. And also, I just want to point out that the advisory committee is a standing committee of the Arts Commission. The ordinance clearly states that they're in. I gave you the language of the ordinance that clearly states that it's the advisory committee and that they are to advise the Arts Commission on matters relating to wares, blah, blah, blah. And so what I'm saying is that the Arts Commission submitted the names to the mayor, and then they were appointed as committee members, and it was a permanent standing committee of the Arts Commission. They've had monthly meetings since 1972 with occasional lapse, but they've had monthly meetings since then. All the minutes have always been posted until recently. And so what I'm saying is that based on the definitions of a policy body, that this committee was created originally by an ordinance of the Board of Supervisors. It imposed the duty that they were to advise the Arts Commission on many matters, including things that they're doing now, which the Arts Commission has asked them to do, and that since the Arts Commission is named in the charter as a commission, that makes them a policy body under the section number 2. They're a commission, and that makes them a policy body. And since the committee itself was created by the Arts Commission and is a standing committee of the Arts Commission, it says further on down below about a standing committee, it says any standing committee of a policy body, irrespective of its composition. That means it doesn't have to actually have Art Commissioners sitting on that advisory committee. It doesn't say that it has to be members of the policy body. It says any composition of that. And I think it's pretty clear that the advisory committee of artists and craftsmen examiners is an advisory committee to the Arts Commission. They don't vote on the final policy, but they advise the full Arts Commission as to what they recommend the Arts Commission do in regards to many matters. We'd spend hours here discussing them all.
That's helpful. Thank you. Can we hear from the respondent? Is anyone present to represent the Arts Commission?
Good evening, members of the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. Rebecca Krell with the Arts Commission. So I'm going to read our response to these complaints, and then
Can you increase the volume on the microphone?
the microphone on?
Yes,
please.
Okay. Is that better?
Is there any way to turn it up?
Can you increase the volume on our microphone?
Is that better?
Hold on.
Okay. How does that sound?
Is there any way to turn up the microphone on the dais? On the podium?
I can hear it.
You can? Okay. Thank you.
I can hear.
But members in the audience cannot. They were.
I mean, if you could speak up best that you can.
Sure. I'm going to read the...
If we could restart the time,
Sure.
Councilor Shea. Yeah.
Thanks. So I'll read our response and then would be glad to answer any questions that task force members have. The Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Crafts Examiners is not a policy body. The Arts Commission has consulted with the city attorney over the years in regards to this committee's status. The Advisory Committee is not enumerated in the city's charter. It was created by ordinance in 1972. The Sunshine Ordinance lists the following in the definition section, and that lists the definition. We are maintaining that it is not a committee created by the Board of Supervisors. It is not created by the initiative of a policy body, nor was it created by a grant. It is not a subcommittee of the Arts Commission. The minutes are not posted as draft and approved by the Arts Commission. Staff posts the minutes of the meetings as a courtesy to artists and other interested members of the public who are unable to attend the meeting. While it is not subject to the rules and regulations governing a policy body as specified in the Sunshine Ordinance, it is subject to the Brown Act governing public meetings. This is why the meetings are still noticed and provide for public comment. The Brown Act only requires 10-day posting of meetings for closed session minutes. The Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Crafts Examiners meetings are not closed and therefore not subject to the 10-day posting notice for closed session. We're maintaining that there's been no violation. I did check our website. We've posted minutes for every meeting that we've had. The June 5th meeting, which I believe is the subject of this violation, the meetings were posted on the 26th, I believe. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the complainants?
I do.
Or the respondents?
I do.
Member Wolf?
Ms. Krell. So I hear what you're saying, and you've made numerous statements saying how it was not created, but you didn't necessarily state how it was created.
It was created by ordinance by the voters.
Like this body. Sunshine Task Force was created by the voters.
By the voters.
Okay, it was created by the voters. So it was not part of a charter amendment?
No, it is not in the charter. The Arts Commission is in the charter. The entire section of Prop L and all of the subsequent, the Board of Supervisors has subsequently added ordinances to Prop L. It's all in the police code.
Okay, and does this particular body report to or answer to or is supervised or anything? It's completely independent?
It's an entirely separate body.
Independent body, okay. And you stated how it's covered by the Brown Act but not by the Sunshine Ordinance. Can you explain the difference?
That's what we've been advised by the city attorney.
Did they give you a reason? I'm curious because the Sunshine Ordinance is an extension of the Brown Act in this respect.
Right. I would have to check with our city attorney and get back to you on that. That's the advice they've given us.
You can't really separate them. They're kind of symbiotic. So
okay. Well, it would be a passive meeting body under the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force.
Be a passive meeting body. You're claiming that it's a passive meeting body.
That's my understanding, looking through the documents we submitted to you.
Well, we're looking for, okay, so the San Francisco Arts Commission is claiming that this body is a passive meeting body and not a policy body.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Are there any further questions from other members? Member Hensey? No?
No.
So I have a question for the other members. I feel like we have been confronted with a very similar issue to this in the past. Does that sound familiar? And does anyone recall how that was resolved?
Well, there was one issue. It was I think it was the Shelter Monitoring Committee, where we had determined that it was a policy body. But I had also, I've done, some trainings around the city. People have, the various bodies have asked for trainings. And I happened to come upon the planning commission. They have an advisory code committee of some sort. And that body, they thought that they were a passive meeting body also. And so part of my training was we're just going to read the definitions first, because that's where it all begins, right? So we had everybody around the table. There was probably about 15 people there, and everybody read a paragraph. When they came upon the section regarding a policy body around definitions, and they saw that that a policy body that creates a committee, is in fact a policy body, all of a sudden the room got very silent. So there's another example right there. Here it's being claimed that this particular body, it's a little different because it's claimed to have been created like we are, as a voter-approved body. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that it's not enumerated in the charter. The Ethics Commission was created by the voters. It's enumerated in the charter. Okay, so that's really the question we have here, and I think that's where this all begins, because everything else will then depend upon that definition.
Thank you for that. I think with that explanation, I don't see what additional information we would need to gather from the parties in order to move this item forward to the full task force for adjudication under 67.16. Is there any other information that that other members are looking for?
I would just, for the benefit of the respondent, if they have any documentation that, in fact, proves or shows that this body has some status other than what the petitioners are claiming it to be, that would be very helpful and help streamline the whole process as to, we get to an answer to this much faster.
Yes, thanks. I'll see if we have a written opinion from the city attorney, and if not, if we can obtain one. I would, in closing, just like to say we do always post the minutes. That seems to me to be the important point in the interest of transparency. The minutes are always posted. They're there for every single meeting. The meetings are open to the public. The meetings follow all of the requirements of the Brown Act for public meetings.
Then, okay.
So I'm not quite sure.
You see, that's what concerns me here. If you're claiming that it falls under the Brown Act, then what definition is different in the Sunshine Ordinance that is different?
I believe it's a couple of technical issues. So one around draft minutes, and then draft minutes being approved by the Arts Commission. So that doesn't happen. It's just one version of the minutes that are posted by staff.
I see. Okay.
Right. It's some technical differences.
The ordinance in its enhancement provides the public more transparency, but that's the point here. Is if you are claiming, and this is really more of the task force question, but I'll just say it, if you're claiming that this body falls under the jurisdiction of the Brown Act, then those provisions that are contained in the Sunshine Ordinance, it also falls under.
And I think
that's not the advice we've received, but I'll look to obtain it in writing.
And I think also, in addition to obtaining that information in writing from the city attorney's office, I think that any documentation regarding the creation of these entities is really what you're looking for, right,
Yeah.
Member Wolf? Because I think that would be very helpful. That if you may provide a written memo from the city's attorney's office, but it's really the documentation that would support that legal advisement is what we're actually looking for. The documentation about the creation of these entities.
Okay, it's Prop L. It's in the police code. It was passed by the voters in November 1975.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you for providing that.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion at this time?
I move that we, this
has not been, you need to determine jurisdiction
Okay, so-
and.
Yes.
right, so I move to, we find this in jurisdiction. There's no public documents. This is procedural under meetings portion of the Sunshine Ordinance. And to move this forward for full hearing at the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and that these items be heard separately.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on that motion?
Hi, I'm Robert J. Clark.
Sorry.
It's nice to see everybody again. I'm in support of you putting this in front of the full task force. Of course, I'm supporting my brother's position. I do remember we just went through a big, long bunch of hearings at the task force when the Art Commission was claiming in the past that the community working group wasn't a policy body. And the task force determined that it was. Now, what happened since that time is that the Art Commission disbanded the community working group and sent everything that they were sending to the community working group to the advisory committee of street artists and crest examiners. And so everything is going through them now. And I just want to make it clear that this concept that this is not a chart amendment, you ought to tell the voters about that, because in the controller's statement pursuant to Charter Section 9.112 of Proposition L, he states in the voters' handbook, should the proposed charter amendment. And we've pointed out several times in this ballot measure where it makes it clear it's a charter amendment. Not only is Proposition L a charter amendment, but Proposition L was written by the Board of Supervisors and put on the ballot for the voters to vote in favor of. So the original Proposition L was written by the Board of Supervisors, put on the ballot, and approved by the voters. And the original Advisory Committee of Arts and Crest Examiners was created by the Board of Supervisors when they passed the first legislation in 1972 creating the Street Artist Program, and that made it was created as a standing committee so that the Art Commission could have people coming into the office getting certified on a continual basis so that we could get people out on the street. It's been a standing committee since 1972, and as my brother said, he was the original secretary on it. And we did present these things in the chart. It says it at least a half a dozen times that we pointed out where that this Proposition L is a charter amendment. And so this concept that it was put way in the back in an appendix some way where so that means it's not in the charter anymore is absurd. And it's getting more and more absurd that I have to come to meeting after meeting after meeting to try to talk to these people who are trying to continue to have private secret meetings, not tell the street artists what occurred at those meetings. And when we just simply ask them, well, what are the draft minutes? Can we see the draft minutes? Then we're told, oh, this isn't a policy body, so we don't have to print draft minutes. The important question isn't that did they get the draft minutes up on time or a couple of days late. The question is that this is a policy body, and the Art Commission must be told once again that it is a policy body and that they have to go by all the rules in the Sunshine Ordinance as well as the Brown Act.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hold on. I have before I call the roll, I'm wondering if we could also ask for clarification from our legal counsel, because this would be a matter of law, as to whether Prop L was in fact a charter amendment. I'm not clear, and I don't know whether the analysis or the comments that the controller puts in a ballot item is in fact claiming what it is. Generally, charter amendments are very well identified in the ballot, and then that would be a question for me. And I'm just reading through this, and because it's old, it's 1975, I may just not be used to how these things are reading, but there are a couple of statements from acting clerks. There's a motion here that says charter amendment. And then there's other areas where it talks about ordinance. So that makes it very confusing, and I think the task force needs a very definitive opinion on that.
Ms. Leger, can you put that request in to our city attorney and make sure that the due date for that would be whenever the packet is circulated for when this item appears on the full agenda of the task force, so we have time to review it. I don't know when this is going to be calendared, so.
It will be taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, say that again.
Ms. Trabue, I was Member Wolf was asking for a memo from our council on a few issues regarding this matter, and so we want to make sure that that memo is circulated prior to the full task force meeting, so we have time to review that analysis.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we ready to take a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Member Wolf?
Aye.
Member Wolf, aye. Member Hensy?
Aye.
Member Hensy, aye. Chair Tesfaye?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. For the next few items, we have about 12 minutes left for the meeting. And so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to make a determination of jurisdiction and that these records are in fact public. I had the opportunity to look over some of these items and have an opinion on that matter. But do any of the other?
One moment, please, Ms. Leger. Can you mute the outside call for the moment?
Can I?
Mute Ms. Trabue for the moment. Her phone is giving us feedback.
Oh, wait a minute.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So moving forward, I was discussing our need to make a determination of jurisdiction and a finding that the documents requested are public for items number
9 through 14.
9 through 14. And I've had an opportunity to look at these items. Do the members have any other thoughts or concerns that any of these items are not within our jurisdiction or do not contain documents that are public?
No, I'm good with that. Which one were you concerned about?
I didn't have any concerns. I'm saying I did
you-
have the opportunity to look at these ahead of time in anticipation of our need to make that determination because of running out of time. And I would like to make a motion to find jurisdiction and that the documents are public for these items in order to meet our requirements.
And these items will then be put on our agenda for next month?
Mm-hmm. Yes, or whenever our clerk is able to.
I would prefer that if we could hear, if we're going to take jurisdiction this month, that all these items be on the agenda for next month.
That would probably overload the agenda as there's over
I mean, they
6
can be on the agenda, but then we won't necessarily get to them.
Right. I'm finding it a little difficult that we have so many items that we're finding in jurisdiction, and then we don't have committees to hear these items.
What do you guys think? I will not be present at the next meeting. I'm going to be out of the country in September. So, of the committee, I'll be at the full task force hearing. So, do you think that you will have the ability to hear all of these items at the next?
However, how many we can hear, but it all depends. I mean, I could review if you want to review them with me, or if you want to review them and determine which ones might be more streamlined and which ones might require more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that I wouldn't want to prejudice a specific item as needing more time or less time without actually hearing from the petitioner, but my review of these items, I do believe that these are within our jurisdiction and that the documents requested are public.
It's the purview of you as the chair to determine, kind of help how the agenda gets created too.
Yeah.
So
At this time, I would prefer not promising that all these items will appear on the September agenda. I don't think that it would be appropriate to make parties be prepared and present for a meeting, and then it's not feasible to have their item called.
Okay.
So that is my preference.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if this is possible by our procedures, but we could have no jurisdictional hearings next month. Although these don't take very long, so I guess that wouldn't buy us much more time to hear an extra case or two. But
yeah.
So you're saying move all the jurisdictional items to different committees and provide us with as much time as possible to hear. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So in that case, would we only be finding jurisdiction and that the documents are public for, in your estimation, clerks, for the next committee meeting of the task force, are we already basically full for the September meeting?
Pretty much all the full task force meetings are overbooked.
The committee meeting.
The committee meetings for next month, splitting these items between the CAC and the complaint committee, we're right on schedule.
Okay. Because what I'm hearing is that we should only find jurisdiction and that the documents are public for the items that we will be able to hear next month. And so in that case, if the agenda is already full, then we shouldn't find jurisdiction or that the documents are public for any of these.
This is a process issue in that if we don't find jurisdiction and that the records are public, we're violating the 45-day rule.
That's my understanding as well. And
unless the petitioner waives the 45-day rule.
Yes, but there's no way we can force them to.
No, it's a question to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hearing that, my decision is for us to I'm going to make the motion to find that we have jurisdiction over these items and that the documents are public at this time, and we'll consider a different process going forward about asking the petitioner if they're willing to waive the 45-day deadline, but because we don't have that opportunity for these items right now, I would like us to move forward on that motion so that we aren't in violation of our own rules. Roll call. Will we
Second.
need a second?
Please turn Ms. Trudeau's microphone back on.
Wait a minute. We
No,
can't.
right now I've made a motion.
So
Okay.
we
Okay, so public comment?
No,
not yet.
Chuck, I have a point of order. We cannot take
Okay.
this. We cannot take this by consent calendar because we didn't agendize it as consent calendar. So we can take them. If you want to take them as combined, then each one has to be expressed individually.
Okay. Well, we don't have the parties present for a number of these items, so if you would like, we can just be in violation of our own rules. We can proceed in that way and not find any
Three of the complaints are mine. I'm here.
Please,
I'm the
Mr.
petitioner.
Bowe.
line, Ms. Leger? Thanks. So
Can't our clerk just call each individual item?
The standard practice is that we would call all the items and take a vote on them as a group.
Right. That's what I'm requesting.
will we need to be able to hear from each of these parties?
They were informed of today's hearing, but they were not requested to show up.
Okay. Well, I think that's public knowledge that that's our procedure.
Yeah, unless we could have figured this out ahead of time before the agenda was created and marked them as consent calendar.
No, but that they need to be present if they want to have something to say about the jurisdiction of their item. That's public knowledge that they need to do that. So I'd like to begin by calling the next item. And we will only be considering whether we have jurisdiction of this item and whether the documents are public.
Would you like us to call items 9 through 14?
Yes.
Item number 9, file number 18062, complaint filed by Jay Walker against the San Francisco Public Utilities Commissioner Vince Courtney and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission for allegedly violating Administrative Code Sections 6721 and 6724 by redacting records in an inappropriate manner.
Madam Chair, can I just help streamline this very quickly?
What's your thought?
I move to find in jurisdiction that that the documents are public for file number 18062, 18063, 18064, 18065, 18066, and 18067.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Is there any public comment on that motion? Can you please unmute the line?
Speak on the public comment?
One moment. Mr. Young, did you want to say anything? Okay.
Do we have any public comment on the motion at this time?
I would like to speak.
Okay.
I believe 3 of the complaints are mine. They didn't read out what they were exactly, but 2 of them involve not taking general public comment at a meeting. They're not document requests.
Thank you
So
for that.
they're pretty straightforward.
Thank you so much for that.
And if I may, what makes it important that they be heard is that it involves the Historic Preservation Commission. The Pioneer Monument rehearing in front of the Board of Appeals is September 12th. And what President Fong is most concerned about is the procedure that the Historic Preservation Commission went through in issuing the certificate of appropriateness. And I believe that in listening to the audio of a full 2 years of Historic Preservation Commission meetings, that a public comment wasn't taken on multiple counts. In fact, there is a previous sunshine order of determination issued against the Historic Preservation Commission. And I think this is important. It's a high-profile case. And it involves a piece of artwork that's been there prior to the earthquake of 1906.
Thank you for that information. Is there any other public comment on the motion? Please state your name.
Yes, hello. I'm Hank Heckel, the compliance officer with the mayor's office. I'd just like to make a comment with respect to file number 18066, the complaint filed by Mr. Petrellis against the clerk of the board. Respecting Mayor Breed's calendar. This may be sort of a technical semantic point, and I'd just like to point out, my understanding is that the complaint is lodged against the clerk of the Board of Supervisors as the custodian of Mayor Breed's calendar in the days prior to her inauguration while she was still a supervisor, and so the complaint is lodged against them as custodian of those records. But I'd just like to make a comment that to the extent this finding addresses whether or not the calendar items in question are public, I understand the calendar is a public document. My understanding of the issue with Mr. Petrellis is that he's objecting to redactions that were made. So our position, the position I believe will be communicated by the clerk of the board at a proper time, is that those items were redacted because they were of a personal nature and not relating to city business, and therefore I would just make that comment that we're not sort of waiving our position that those items within the document are not in fact public because they're unrelated to city business.
Thank you. Do we have any other further public comment on the motion at this time? Seeing none, can we call the public comment as closed on the motion? Can we call the roll?
Member Wolf.
Aye.
Member Wolf, aye. Member Hensy.
Aye.
Member Hensy, aye. Chair Tesfaye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
I believe we still have one item left on the agenda, item number 8, file number 17029. It is also regarding the Advisory Committee of Street Artists and Craft Examiners, and probably the same argument regarding whether or not it's a policy body or not will be used, but as we are out of time, I leave it to your discretion.
I think Mr. Boo hung up the phone, but I think her
No, I didn't, but I'm back here
good.
again. It cut off.
Okay, good. I would like to continue this item to the next meeting. And, well, Mr. Boo, could you be present at the next meeting?
When is that?
September 25th, I believe.
I can do
I think it's
September 25th.
Yeah, I can be there.
Okay. So should we make a motion to that effect
Yeah, I'll move.
Yes.
to continue the item?
Yes.
Did you say so moved?
Also move.
Okay. I'll second that item. Do we have a motion on the continuation of file number 17029?
Oh, that one. Okay. Yeah, okay. I was ready to go tonight, but okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no public comment, can we call the roll?
Member Hensy.
Aye.
Member Hensy, aye. Member Wolf.
Aye.
Member Wolf, aye. Chair Tesfaye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Continue the item.
Can you call the next item?
Next item are the, I'll call them all.
I mean, I believe the next item would be adjournment.
Adjournment. I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
We don't take public comment on adjournment, right? No. Thank you.
The meeting is adjourned. Can you stop the recording, please? The square button.
Update on our reappointment or anything else that you need us to do?
No, next month that will happen. Yours, because you're here and present.
Yeah.